Before we get going, I just want to point out this awesome t-shirt I'm wearing. It comes from Into the AM, fine purveyors of graphic tees and elevated menswear. They're adding more all the time. They're unique, they're interesting. The t-shirts are very well made. And remember, when you order from Into the AM, you can use code Grouchy when you check out, or use the link in the description to save 10%.
The Grouchy Nerd.
Alright, you antisocial weirdos, it's time to learn a game that can play at the ideal player count. 1. Slay the Spire, the board game, designed by Gary Dworetsky, Anthony Giovanetti, and Casey Yano. The latter two also designed the incredible video game that this board game is based on, and the former helped me get a copy of the game, so all three are just fine by me. And I did get the collector's edition, which comes with mats and metal coins, because I really like the video game, but I'm not going to use any of those components in this video, because if you get the standard version, I want you to see what it is that you're going to be actually playing with. It's an asymmetrical roguelike deck builder. So each time you play, you're going to start with some pretty crummy basic cards, though you'll have many opportunities to upgrade that deck. There are 4 characters to choose from, each with different strengths and cards. It's not quite a legacy game, but there are some cards that you're going to have to unlock, and it's not quite a campaign game, but you might play 3 or maybe even 4 acts. Each act is made up of a series of encounters, most of which are combat encounters, and your goal in Slay the Spire, the board game, is to defeat the boss of the act that you're playing. Now, a full game could be just one act culminating in that act's boss battle, but where's the fun in that? The whole thing is seeing how far you can get. And honestly, if you're very heavily into the video game, you can probably intuit your way through most of this, but I will try to point out places where the board game changes some things from the video game. But it's a very faithful adaptation, all the way down to how much I like it and how very bad I am at it. It's remarkable how they captured that. Pick a character. Each character plays completely differently. The Ironclad and the Silent are the easier characters to learn, with the Defect being more complex, and the Watcher being the most complex by a mile. Emphasis mine. And I'll go over how each of them are different after we've seen how the game works. Take your chosen character's character board, mini, gray bordered starter deck, black bordered card rewards deck, and yellow bordered rare rewards deck. As you progress through the Spire, you'll have opportunities to add some of these cards to your deck. Most of the time, card rewards will come from the card rewards deck, which consists of common cards with gray banners and uncommon cards with blue banners, which tend to be better than the common cards. Rare cards are much more powerful, but also rare card rewards are fewer and farther between, as their name would indicate. And you'll have 3 types of cards in your deck: attacks, which deal damage, skills, which usually give you defense and or provide some other benefit, and powers, which go out in front of you when played and give you a bonus for the remainder of that combat. And all player cards have 2 sides: their basic starting side and their upgraded side, noted with this green text and plus sign. When a card is upgraded, simply take it out of the sleeve, flip it, and re-sleeve it. Shuffle each deck separately. Your starter cards, which are a bunch of strikes and defends, and then 1 or 2 cards that are unique to that character, go next to your player board. The reward and rare decks just need to go somewhere nearby. You'll need a distinct space for your deck and discard pile where most of your cards go after they're played, though you'll also need a space for an exhaust pile. Exhausted cards are removed for the remainder of the combat in which they're exhausted and are not shuffled back into your deck until that combat is over. Place the token tray nearby. Tokens in the tray include gold you'll gain and spend, as well as tracking tokens for strength, weakness, vulnerable, poison, miracles, and shivs. Place a red cube on your character's energy track at 3, on their block track at 0, and their HP track at the highest printed number. Or you can be fancy and use a blue cube for your block and a yellow cube for your energy. Nobody comes around to check. You can do whatever you want. Take note of your character's starting ability here and any special rules listed here. Energy is the main resource you'll spend to play cards. Each character's energy looks a bit different, but it's all the same energy. Block mitigates damage sustained in attacks, but usually resets between turns. And if your hit points would ever go below 0, you immediately lose the game. The Spire has slain you in a stunning turn of events. And remember, when you die, you start all the way over. Any cards you've upgraded or gained into your deck or any relics you've gotten all go back to the supply. Set out the days and status decks face up. The Act 1 encounter, elite, and event decks all get shuffled, but the summons can stay in order. Then shuffle the relic, boss relic, potion, and curse decks and set everything nearby. Relics and boss relics provide ongoing abilities or bonuses. Some are active all the time, some only at certain times, and some only activate on a matched roll of the die. We'll get there. Potions provide one-time benefits, though you're limited to only carrying 3 at a time. When a potion is used, discarded, or skipped, it goes to the bottom of the potions deck. Various effects will add days or status cards to your deck. These mostly come from enemy attacks, but Ironclad has a few big attacks that will daze him. Daze cards go on top of your deck, so you're sure to draw them next turn, but they also have ethereal, so when you would discard them at the end of your turn, you'll instead exhaust them back to the supply. Status cards, on the other hand, go into your discard pile, so they won't come up again until you've reset your deck. Status cards have 2 possible effects shown on the top and bottom halves, and 2 different effects can add them to your deck. This, which looks like a daze but green, and a flame. When one of these effects adds a status card to your deck, all status cards in your deck are whichever type was just added until the end of combat. So if you get hit with a swirly green thing, status cards just gum up your deck and can be returned to the supply by spending an energy. If, however, you get hit with a flame, they deal you damage if they're in your hand at the end of your turn. And days and status cards are temporary. They're only in your deck for that combat. When the combat is over, you take them out of your deck and return them to the supply. Curses are usually added to your deck as a result of an event. When you gain a curse, you'll add the topmost curse card to your deck. Take out the Act 1 board and randomly choose an Act 1 map, front or back. Shuffle the map tokens face down. Place a dark map token on each dark map space and a light token on each light space, then flip them all over. As you progress through the game, you'll move up along one of the dotted lines on the map, stopping at each space to resolve some kind of encounter. The first and most common is combat, with elite combat encounters offering tougher challenges but better rewards. Campfires offer a choice between healing some damage and upgrading a card in your deck. You'll also visit the market, find treasure, and resolve events, which are sometimes good and sometimes bad, but sometimes they're very bad. Place your character's mini on the board. Roll the included die and find the boss card with the matching number on the back of the card. Place that boss at the top of the map face down. Place the boot meeple at the bottom of the map on the first encounter. The boot represents your location and tracks your position along the map. Keep the player aid nearby. It's not only useful, but it has the merchant board on the other side, which you're going to need. But also, it's very useful. It shows the steps of a combat turn and a quick reference for the various iconography you'll encounter. Shuffle the Meow's blessing cards and draw 1. Gain the reward in red, then choose one of the 3 blue rewards to gain. Most of these rewards you'll see throughout the game, like gaining gold indicated by a number in a yellow circle, or gaining a card reward. To do this, draw the top 3 cards of your card rewards deck. Choose one to add to your deck or pass, then place all unchosen cards at the bottom of the deck. If that card icon is gold, you'll do this with the rare cards instead. If, when revealing a card from the rewards deck, you reveal a golden ticket, replace that card with the top card of the rare deck and place the golden ticket at the bottom of the rewards deck. Upgrade a card in your deck by flipping it over in its sleeve to the side with the plus sign and the green text. Remove a card from your deck by removing a card from your deck. Transform a card by removing a card in your deck from the game and replace it with the top card of the card's reward deck. To gain a relic, draw the top card of the relic deck and add it to your play area. And gain potions by drawing the indicated number of cards from the potions deck. When you're done, the Meow's blessing cards, including the one you drew, can go back in the box. Playing solo will also get to start with 2 gold and the loaded die solo relic. And if they're giving us that much help, you know it's going to be tough. Oh, you love it. That's why we're here. Set up the first encounter by randomly picking one of the 4 first encounter cards and place it in the row in front of your character. The rest of the first encounter cards can go back in the box. Enemy cards have a name, rewards for defeating it, a hit point track, actions that it will take. Some may have a special ability, and some, like the Red Louse, will have a summon, meaning it will immediately bring another enemy into play with it from the summons deck. If there are several copies of the summon card, pick randomly as they may have different effects. Place a cube on the highest printed number on each enemy's HP track. Some have kind of a lot of HP and will need more than 1 cube. The bigger enemies have a variable amount of health depending on the number of players. Playing solo, we just look at the top least scary number. For these enemies, you'll need this whole other board to track their health. Each turn plays thusly. At the beginning of combat, shuffle your deck. Make sure your energy is reset to 3 and your block to 0, then draw 5 cards. Roll the die. You'll need this result for various cards and abilities for this turn, both for you and for your enemies. If you have any abilities that can change the result of the die, use them now. Resolve any start of combat abilities, generally found on relics, and then any start of turn abilities found on relics and possibly in later turns power cards. Then resolve any abilities you have which are triggered by the die. So having rolled a 6, we can trigger the die result on any relic which has a die trigger. We only have this one so far, but no worries, we can use this 6 to trigger its own ability and gain 1 block. Now you can play cards, activate abilities, and use potions in any order. When playing a card, you must first pay the cost in energy as indicated here. Move your energy track marker accordingly. And if you can't pay the cost in energy, you can't play that card. Some cards cost X, and then they do something X times depending on how many energy you put into that card when you played it. But unlike the video game, you don't have to use all of your energy when you play a card with an X. You can choose just to use some of it. Most of your starting attacks are very basic. Choose a target for the attack, deal the indicated amount of damage to the enemy, moving their HP marker accordingly. However, if the targeted enemy has any block tokens on it, each will negate 1 point of damage from the attack before HP is removed. Some attacks deal damage to each enemy in your row as indicated by this symbol. Otherwise, the cards you play generally apply to just one target. So Ironclad's Twin Strike, which deals 1 damage 2 times, would deal both of these to the same enemy. Some will also apply effects to the targeted enemy. For instance, one of Ironclad's starting cards, Bash, which does 2 damage, also applies vulnerable to the enemy you're attacking. So the next attack will deal double damage. And again, here's a difference from the video game. When you hit something with vulnerable, you're going to double the attack that you do, but then you're going to discard the vulnerable token. It doesn't stay on them for the whole turn, and they only have a maximum of 3 vulnerable tokens on them at any given time. So it's not like in the video game where you can just unload on something that has 1 vulnerable, getting a bunch of bonus damage. You're just going to get 1 attack 1 time for each vulnerable token. But that's also the only way those vulnerable tokens come off of the enemy. They don't come off at the end of the round, so that means you can put 1 on and then wait to attack again until you know you have a massive attack that's going to do a bunch of damage when it gets doubled. And of course, their attacks work the same for you if you get vulnerable. A card with this symbol will apply Weak. Weak will cause the next attack to deal 1 less damage and then remove 1 weak token. If a weak attack ever hits a vulnerable target, the 2 statuses will cancel each other out. Deal regular damage, then remove 1 of each token. Skills may also cause one of these effects, like Disarm, which applies 2 weak, but most of them, like your starting skills, are going to give you block. Move your block marker cube to keep track of how much block you accumulate in a given turn. And you can only ever have a maximum of 20 block at any time. For Ironclad, some of those skills will also grant him strength, like Spot Weakness. When you gain strength, place a strength token on your board. These add +1 to the value of each attack for each strength token you have. So with 2 strength, your basic attacks are now hitting for a 3. And that card we looked at earlier, Twin Strike, which does 1 damage 2 times, will now do 3 damage 2 times. You don't lose strength when you attack like you lose vulnerable or weakness. You get to hang on to them, but you are limited to only 8. And enemies can also get strength. It's a lot less cool when they have it. If the card you played was a power card, place it in front of you. These cards give you some ability that will persist through the end of combat, like Inflame, which gives you a strength, or Juggernaut, which deals damage to an enemy each time you apply block. If the card you played was exhausted, place it in an exhaust pile and will generally be out of play until the end of combat. If the exhausted card was a status or daze card, it will just go back to the supply. Otherwise, when you finish resolving a card, it goes into your discard pile. And there's not really an in-play in this game. You're never really going to put the cards down other than power cards. You're going to pay the cost, resolve the effect, and put it directly into the discard pile. Continue to play cards until you run out of energy or choose to stop. Check for any end of turn effects in play, then discard any remaining cards in your hand. Any cards that are discarded in this way, which have the ethereal keyword, are instead exhausted, so try to use those when they pop up so you don't lose them. Now it's the enemy's turn. First, remove any block value on the enemy left over from last turn. Each enemy in your row will now take an action from left to right. Some enemies have single actions that they'll do each turn. Some will take actions based on the result of the die. Perform the action matching the die result. Remember, the die you rolled at the beginning of the turn is the result that you will use for the whole turn. Others will have cube tracked actions. When those enemies spawn, you'll place a cube in the topmost action space. When it's time for the enemy's action, it will take the action next to the cube, then you'll move the cube down one space. When it reaches the end, it will start back at the top of the red boxes. If there was a gray box, that action does not get repeated. If the enemy attacks you, you'll first lose 1 point of block for each point of damage dealt. If the attack applied an effect, take a matching token. When each enemy has taken an action, it goes back to you. Reset your energy and block, roll the die, resolve any beginning of turn effects, and draw a new hand of 5 cards. If ever you need to draw cards and your deck runs out, shuffle your discard pile, reset your deck, and continue to draw cards. If you defeat an enemy, but there are still active enemies, flip the defeated enemies over and return any tokens on those enemies to their respective supplies. Continue taking turns until you have defeated each enemy. Resolve any effects that happen at the end of combat. If you survived the encounter, you'll now get rewards as indicated in the top corner of the enemy you drew from the encounter deck. Summons won't add additional rewards and can be returned to their place in the summons deck. Rewards at the end of combat usually involve gaining gold and card rewards. Remember, when resolving a card reward, you'll draw the top 3 cards from your card rewards deck, choose one to add to your deck, or pass, choosing none, which is honestly sometimes the better option if none of the cards presented really go with what you're doing in your deck. Then place all unchosen cards at the bottom of the deck. Remember that you are allowed to check the upgraded side of all of the cards before you make your decision. This reward means you'll draw the top card of the potions deck and add it to your play area, or again pass and place it at the bottom of the deck. If you would gain a potion but you're at your max, you can discard one of your potions to add the new one. When you've gained or skipped all your rewards, reset your deck. Return any days or status cards to their respective decks, take back any exhausted cards or power cards that are in front of you, and return any tokens to the token pool. Then reset your block back to 0. Progress to the next room on the map. You must always move one space and must always move up the board toward the boss, following one of the dotted lines. When you move into a space with a question mark, like the second space up, no matter which side of the Act 1 map you're using, you'll draw the top card of the event deck. Many of these events are good, offering you a free card upgrade or maybe healing some of your hit points. However, some may deal you damage or even put a curse card into your deck. Encounter rooms are just the same as the first encounter. Draw the top card of the encounter deck and proceed with combat. Remember to check for any summoned enemies and find those cards in the summon deck. Some encounter rooms feature elite enemies. When you enter one of those rooms, draw the top card of the elite enemy deck. Any summoned enemies will go to the left of the elite. Elite enemies hit harder and last longer than regular enemies. And unlike the video game, when you defeat an elite, the summoned enemies don't flee. You gotta kill them all. You gotta kill everybody. Everybody. But the rewards are that much sweeter. Elites always give a relic as a bonus, drawing the top card from the relic deck and putting it into your play area, or passing and putting it on the bottom of the relic deck. And elites in Acts 2 and 3 will offer upgraded card rewards. When you add a card from this kind of reward, you'll immediately flip it over to its upgraded side. You'll also gain a relic when you move into a treasure chest room. When you enter a market room, flip the player aid to the market board and fill the top row with relics from the relic deck and the bottom row with potions from the potions deck. Then draw the top 3 cards from your card rewards deck. You can spend gold to buy any relic or potion for the cost listed in the bottom right corner of the card, with the relic in the first space coming in at a discount. Or you can buy a revealed card. Common cards cost 2 gold, uncommon cost 3, and rare cards cost 6. You can also spend 3 gold to remove 1 card from your deck, which can be a really strong move. You can get rid of one of your less efficient starting cards, or maybe a curse, or even a card reward you pick picked up that isn't really meshing well with the rest of your deck. When you enter a room with a campfire, you can choose to either rest and heal your character by 3 hit points, or smith and upgrade a card in your deck. When you finally make it to the top of the map, you'll face the boss. Flip the boss card over and bring it down into your row. Boss encounters are just very hard combat encounters. Be sure to check for summons. Like elites, the boss will go to the right of the summoned enemies, and like elites, defeating a boss does not make its summons flee. If you're able to defeat the boss and minions it may have summoned, you'll get a very nice reward. When resolving a gold card reward, you'll choose between 3 rare cards. Again, you may pass and again put all unchosen cards to the bottom of the deck. Then playing solo, you'll draw the top 3 cards of the boss relic deck and choose one to take, or pass, and place all non-chosen cards to the bottom of the deck. Boss relics are functionally just relics, but are generally much stronger than regular relics. Then either call it a day, having beaten the act, or move on to Act 2. Return all Act 1 cards to the box, then set up Act 2. Roll the die to choose which of the Act 2 bosses you'll hopefully face, and set up the Act 2 decks, shuffling the standard encounter, elite encounter, and event decks, and not shuffling the summons deck. You'll also reshuffle your card rewards deck between acts and fully heal your character. Play continues in this way, fighting your way through Act 2 and then Act 3. If you manage to defeat the Act 3 boss, you win! You have slayed the Spire. Kind of. There is more to it. If, however, at any time your hit points are reduced to 0, you die. Well, your character dies. And that's how to play Slay the Spire, the board game. However, there is just a bit more to know. Win or lose, flip to the Unlocks section at the back of the rulebook. Check 1 box per boss you defeated, plus 1 additional box for the character you just played. When each box next to a lock is filled, add the cards locked with a 1, 2, or 3 in the corner to the deck. Each unlock will add powerful new cards to your card reward decks. When you've unlocked everything you can for a character, you can fill the colorless or Act 4 tracks. When colorless cards are unlocked, merchant rooms will now allow you to purchase the top 3 colorless cards as well as the 3 from your own card rewards deck. Prices for the colorless cards are still based on rarity. When you unlock Act 4, you'll have the chance to fight the heart at the top of the spire, which feels like that's where a brain would go. To do so, you'll have to collect 3 keys along your journey. 1 by not resting or smithing at a campfire, 1 for skipping a relic, either as an elite reward or a treasure chest, and 1 as a reward for defeating a special burning elite. Each time you beat an Act 3 boss, you can mark a box on the Ascension table, unlocking the next Ascension level. Ascensions are optional, but they offer increasingly difficult challenges when you want to replay the game. As you get better, the game is going to get better at stopping you. And each new Ascension builds off the new rules of each Ascension before it. So by Ascension 4, you'll have harder elites, 1 fewer maximum HP, harder events, and a potion limit of 2. There's also a list of achievements in the back and rules for setting up a randomized game, which may even involve using other characters' card rewards decks. That's crazy. And look at that, what a silky smooth segue into talking about the characters. We've already looked at a few of Ironclad's cards, but let's take a closer look. Ironclad plays with strength, adding 1 damage to each attack for each strength at a limit of 8, and plays into big attacks. He also has effects centered around exhausting cards. Normally, when a card is exhausted, that's kind of it. It just goes into the exhaust pile and it's out of play for the rest of combat. However, Ironclad can use a power like Berserk, which allows him to deal a damage to each enemy in your row. And remember, some of his attacks are going to give him dazes, which have ethereal, so they're going to exhaust when they would discard, so each of those is going to be doing an additional damage. And Ironclad uses his larger HP pool to use his health as a resource with cards like Offering, which hits you for 1 HP, but you gain 2 energy and draw 3 cards. And when a card says lose HP, that's not an attack, so block isn't going to help you from this. You've got to lose that HP when you play this card. The Silent isn't strong, but she's no less deadly, leaning heavily on skill cards. Several of her cards will deal an enemy poison. Use the poison tokens to keep track of how much poison is on the enemy, but there can be no more than 30 poison in play across all enemies. And don't worry, poison can never go on you. At the end of your turn, as in before the enemy gets to attack, they'll lose 1 HP for each poison token on them. And remember, like I just said, losing HP is not an attack, so if you're able to get poison down on an enemy that's got a ton of block, doesn't matter, they're still taking the poison damage. And unlike the video game, that poison sticks around. It doesn't diminish at the end of every turn. It just stays right there. The Silent also uses shivs, represented by these tokens, which may be used to deal 1 damage to an enemy whenever you could play a card. These shiv attacks follow all the same rules as a regular attack in terms of being modified by strength, weakness, and vulnerable. And there's a few differences from the video game here as well. Obviously, the shivs aren't cards, they're tokens, and there are only 5 of them. And that is intentional. There are only 5 shivs that you can have on you at any given time. If you were to gain a shiv while you are at your maximum of 5 shivs, you can use that new shiv's damage immediately, or you have to skip getting that new shiv. The Defect is a little robot who channels and evokes orbs, lightning, frost, and dark. When channeled, you'll place a cube of the matching color into one of your orb slots. Lightning and frost orbs have an end of turn effect, and all 3 types have an evocation effect, as explained on the Defect's player board. When you evoke an orb, you'll remove an orb of your choice and apply that effect. When using Dual Cast, you'll evoke the same orb twice. Lightning and dark orbs can affect 2 different targets when evoked. Some more differences from the video game here. The orbs don't rotate and you don't have to evoke them in order. When you channel an orb, you can put it into any of the available slots, and when you evoke an orb, you can choose any of the available orbs to evoke. And if your orb slots are full and you channel a new orb, you can choose to evoke any one of your orbs and put the new one in that slot. The Watcher is the most complex character by far. She uses miracle tokens to bank energy, so she's ready to unleash massive turns, and has the most deck manipulation of any of the characters, with cards that allow her to scry, looking at and rearranging the top of your deck. She also has 3 stances: neutral, calm, and wrath, which you'll be switching between during combat. She starts each combat in neutral, which doesn't really have any special rules. Entering a calm stance, however, puts her at peace for cards like Water, a power which gives you 1 block when you end your turn in calm. And when you leave calm stance by entering neutral or wrath, you'll also gain 2 energy. While in wrath, each attack deals +1 damage. However, at the end of your turn, she takes 1 damage. So a card like Halt, which gives you 1 block and then a second block if you're in wrath, might be a good one to look out for. All right, I think that's all I got. Get out of my weirdly sentient tower, I guess, with a heart. Sometimes tentacles. Whatever, get out.
The Grouchy Nerd.
It's just that if it is sentient and we're going to the top of the tower to slay it, why is it the heart and not a brain? Is the heart in the middle of the tower? Do we not have to go up that high? And if it doesn't have a brain, what are we doing here? What are the ethical ramifications of slaying a spire with no brain? We're just assuming evil intent? I don't think that's right. I just don't think that's right.